T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast, the space game podcast that generally talks about Star Citizen, but hey, nope, not this week. No. This week, we are talking about a different long-term space game that's been making some regular improvements over the years and just released a new update. And my friend Morphologis here has gotten a chance to do quite a bit of playing and talking and put out a great video on it. And I thought it would be a good chance for us to sit down and talk about the overall vibe of this game and kind of where it's come from, where it's going, and how it is. So thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really glad that you reached out. It's been a little while since we've talked on one of your podcasts. I think the last time we talked was before 3.24's release. That was like not 3.23's release. This was like maybe 6 months ago. It was a while ago. Now 3.24 is not out yet, guys. Sorry, no need for alarm. It's not even wave one.
We're still talking before that's released.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has been a little while, and there's actually quite a bit of stuff going on in the space game realm. So we'll talk about a couple different games here, but mainly today, wanted to talk about No Man's Sky from the perspective, I think, at least from my perspective, as somebody who has maybe tried it a couple times over the years since it's come out, when maybe a major update has come out, but really interested in knowing overall what does this game offer. What's with the hype behind this specific update that's coming out, and who's the game made for? So we'll start off with, your own history with covering space games. You started with PlanetSide 2, is that correct?
I started with PlanetSide 2, yeah. That was when I first started making videos. The very first video I made was like a really long, poorly edited video where I spoke really strangely about PlanetSide. It was more just gameplay. It was really bad. Please don't go. It's still on YouTube. One of those. Please don't go watch it. Yeah,
go check it out. Just do that oldest video.
And then I started learning that people like tutorial stuff, and that's where I really started learning how to like build videos and structure them and do framing and like write for videos and stuff. So I did like a series called Be Effective and stuff, which actually did really well for the time. I mean, I had like a few hundred subscribers. And then after that, I went I made Space Engineers content for quite some time, for a few years actually, and I made a big series on that, and that's where I really grew from like less than 1,000 subscribers to over 50,000, and then I moved to Taiwan, and that's history. I've covered more than just Space Engineers and PlanetSide 2. I mean, I've done content on a number of other games, aside from Star Citizen as well, but mostly it's been PlanetSide 2. Space Engineers, then Star Citizen, and then anything space related and architecture actually related is another thing. I've been trying to do more of those, but that's a bit harder.
I love the space vibes. Throughout the time, switching from one main game to another, doing that, has that been a struggle? Did it feel like you were resetting when you did all the Space Engineers up until a certain point, and then kind of switched over to Star Citizen?
Well, I think I was really fortunate about when I switched with Space Engineers, because I had just moved and I was still trying to make content on Space Engineers, but I was also getting really interested in Star Citizen content because I could no longer make content with my two other YouTubing friends, Oasis Space and Captain Shack, who I'd done the series with. So I had to kind of find something that I could do something more independent with, or do more independent content with. And that ended up being Star Citizen. And so it was a gradual transition where I was making Star Citizen content, then Space Engineers content, and it just happened for a couple months that way until eventually I started making more Star Citizen content than Space Engineer content, with occasional Space Engineers in between. Like it was a gradient, so it wasn't a harsh transition where one day I was one thing, and I think that helps because my viewership, I think, would have been it would been too jarring for the viewership to just suddenly switch from one game to another game. Like the other game never even existed. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's what I mean. I'm fortunate. I switched, and I switched at a time where the interest in Space Engineers was, I think it wasn't waning, but it wasn't super high, and Star Citizen was starting to become more exciting. It was actually around 2016 when I did my first video, when I bought into the game. So that was kind of like the peak of initial excitement. You know, the Gamescom presentation was fresh on people's minds, and people were thinking Squadron 42 is going to come out the next year. Oh, that didn't turn out so well.
But it is coming out next year, more.
Right. Yeah, always next year. But really, actually, this time we're not talking about Star Citizen today. I'm going to try to stay away from that. But since we're on the subject of games I cover, I can't avoid it.
Yeah.
And I've talked about No Man's Sky as well. I talked about No Man's Sky on my channel many years ago, around when it came out, and made a couple of videos that didn't do particularly well, but they were there. You know, I try to sprinkle in interesting space games that I like.
Yeah, I think as space gamers, we're all kind of hovering around in the same circles and want to hear about different games coming out in that genre. And right now, it's interesting. It's an interesting field. Over the years, let's say the last decade or so, going and covering different kinds of games, what have you noticed? Space gamers, we'll just continue to use that term. What have you noticed that your viewers and gamers in the space genre are looking for from these types of games?
It's hard to say. It's hard to generalize for a community that's so diverse, because they're really, it's not, you know, I would say the people who like Star Citizen and other games that I cover don't fall neatly into one category. You would think that they would, but I've learned through the videos I've posted, just what gathers people interest, that, you know, sometimes it's not what you expect. Particularly like the Star Wars content that I've done. Like, I love Star Wars, and I thought, since I like Star Wars, that people in this community would also like it, since there's a lot of parallels with Star Citizen, and I've made Star Wars like themed content and Space Engineers, but I was wrong. Like, people are not as interested, and it's just really interesting. But my general feeling is that people are looking for something that comes from a more innate part of our existence. Like, to get more philosophical, I think people have this desire to explore, to find something new. They wonder what's out there. Is there life? You know, there's so many stars in the sky. You know, so many of them we know now have planets, and many of them are possibly habitable. You know, it sparks so much human curiosity. I think these games kind of try to capture that in a bottle and allow us to experience just a little taste of what it would be like if our technology was good enough to actually go out and see this stuff. So I think that's where that's why it draws so many people from different backgrounds, is because I think most people have this feeling, this wonder when they look up at the sky. But I think that when we talk about space games in general, what people are interested in has been changing. Expectations have become more extreme over the years, and that's maybe a more separate question to answer, that I'm going to step back from for a moment to make sure that I've answered your initial question before I go tangent.
Well, yeah, I think what I'm hearing is people are looking for something different, something that you might not necessarily encounter in a game based on Earth, or even a game based in fantasy. I mean, there's a blurring of the lines for sure. You know, you could talk about some people call Star Wars like sci-fantasy kind of, rather than sci-fi. But the idea that you're getting out of the bounds of what our physics or what our understanding of a world is going to give you, and you're getting to see kind of a different story. I think Outer Wilds did a really good job of that. I don't know if you ever played that. It's a
I'm familiar with it, but I never played it.
Yeah, great freaking game. I didn't get through the whole thing, but I have watched the whole thing, and it is a magnificent space game. Very small in scale compared to some of the games we're talking about here today. But I think that, like you said, you can't really cookie cutter people who are interested in space games. Like, we're looking for something special, but it's all kinds of different special. Now, I would like to go back to your rant, your perspective rant you were about to get into, because, or rather, tangent, I guess, because that was interesting to me.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed over the years, and this has been, I think it came in a very sharp focus. I think starting a little bit with No Man's Sky's initial release, but then leading up until a lot of games releases. The biggest one recently would be Starfield. Of people's expectations, since, and I would say Star Citizen had a huge role to play in this. gamers started to see the possibilities with gaming, like being able to create a whole world that you can explore inside a virtual space was a wild concept back in 2016 at the Gamescom presentation, where they showed off the first planetary landing with the freelancer coming down at Delamar and stuff. You know, I think we're a bit jaded now, and I feel like we've touched on the subject before, that tech, that thing didn't really exist before. Like, people have tried to do stuff kind of like that, but actually fully physicalizing it was something that was not done before. It was crazy to think that technology had gotten to that point. And since then, regardless of how people feel about Star Citizen now, I think that the expectations of the community now has been the people who like this kind of game, and it's a big, wide group of people from lots of different backgrounds. I think their expectations are now much higher than they ever were before, where it's kind of now, a given that they expect to see like a full spherical world that's physicalized and simulated, and they want to see stuff happening on it and that's detailed, and like they want to be able to fly from ground to space and space to ground seamlessly. Like, all of these are becoming expectations, whether or not, and this is just like speaking independently of whether or not it's realistic or likely that any other game is going to be able to pull this off because of limitations of technology and budget. So it's kind of skewing, I think, people's experiences of games, and it's making games that otherwise could have been good seem bad. And I think Starfield is one of them. And a lot of people say it's bad, but I actually don't think it's that bad. I think the story maybe isn't that great, but I enjoyed the experience of it quite a lot. I wasn't being disingenuous or trying to suck up to Bethesda or anything, because I did get to play it a bit earlier than everyone else as part of the creator program. But I genuinely really enjoyed it. It like sparked something in me that I really that's driven me to love space games. This feeling of wanting to explore, and my admiration of NASA since I was a kid, and the work of astronauts and the space program and the shuttle program and stuff. Like, all of these things have been super deeply interesting to me since I was a kid. So like, it touched on a really important part to me of why I like space games. So I really enjoyed the experience, even though it was really limited. And I knew from very early on, thanks to following Star Citizen's development, based on what they had shown us, what my expectations should be for the scope of the game. I knew ahead of time that they were tiles. I knew ahead of time that they weren't fully simulating. Like, all of this stuff I knew. It was not a shock to me. I tried to prepare people for that, but Bethesda didn't do a good job of that. That's on them. That they didn't prepare people for expectations.
Todd never does a good job of that, though. Todd and Chris are cut from the same cloth.
I think the industry still needs to catch up with this. I don't think they've realized how far expectations have outstripped like technology at this point. For many myriad reasons, people's expectations are way beyond, I think, what a lot of these companies are able to deliver within a reasonable development cycle. So I think it's become kind of a problem for a lot of games. Even it's still, No Man's Sky struggles with that. I mean, I still see comments about it, about shortcomings in No Man's Sky for how it doesn't do this or that very well. And I can't really fault people for not fully understanding the complications in making what they desire. But it just kind of paints the picture, as I've been trying to say, that there's this perception of technology being far better than it actually is. Well, even thanks to some specific games like Star Citizen.
Even GTA 6, I'm now seeing some whispers and murmurs of, people. I don't know how true they are. Again, these are just literally whispers and murmurs of execs in Rockstar being like, well, people might end up being a little bit disappointed by it because we're doing some big things, but I think this actually was an ex-dev who hasn't been there for a while, so it might not have any merit, but just saying like, people might be disappointed by what they're setting their expectations up for. And obviously, right, that's where we are. This is a game that has been hyped up from the success of GTA 5 for like over 10 years. No matter what it is when it comes out, it's going to not meet people's expectations, and that just seems to be the case with every game that does come out now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cyberpunk's another good example. Now that you're talking about meeting expectations, the expectations for that game were through the roof. as well, and it didn't meet people's expectations because they didn't set them, and they did fall short in some areas, and that was on them. They released too early. There's a whole thing with that we don't have to go into, but yeah, it's setting expectations is really important nowadays. I think, especially within the space game genre,
Yeah.
so that people can understand what they're getting themselves into and be in that state of mind when they enter the game, so that they can fully enjoy what's there to offer. Um, one thing that I've been thinking about recently is a great example. Have you ever played Red Dead Redemption
The
2,
first
the
one,
more
the
recent
second
one?
I've
Yeah.
watched Honey play it.
Yeah. So you think about, I'm not sure how much you know about it, but it's well regarded as like a masterpiece of open world design. There's so much depth, and I have played it a bit. I played it on stream even. Like everybody you interact with, like there's all these cool stories happening in the background, even though there's a main thread underlying plot and you're one character that's driving you through the story. There's all these other things that you can do that make it feel so like alive.
Yeah.
And because it's open world, they call it open world. You can go anywhere and interact with a lot of stuff. That game, when people came into it, now it released a while ago, granted, but I don't think anybody could argue even today that game isn't open world, right? But that game has boundaries, doesn't it? And arguably, Starfield had way more, like way larger boundaries than Red Dead. Now, granted, the density of stuff to do wasn't as great. My point is, like, people's expectations are really important to set correctly nowadays, I think. Otherwise, people like they'll overlook the good parts of the game that you've crafted. So
Yeah. I
guess that's
agreed.
what I want to say with that. Yeah, if people say, like, look for more of a Red Dead Redemption kind of experience in scope for looking at Starfield, maybe people would have been more prepared for a limited play space. I don't know. I think they've messed up more than that on that side. It's hard to compare those two games, and a lot of people be upset about this because Red Dead is such a well-regarded game that's held so high as a standard, and Starfield really isn't there. And I think that's important to also say.
Well, like you said, Red Dead feels alive. I don't think I've
Yeah.
seen another game since then that immediately captured me that way. I haven't played it, but just watching it, like you said, people having stories and interactions and dialogue and all that stuff. And I think Cyberpunk does a good job. But no other game really that I've seen, and granted, I don't play every game that comes out, but no other game really hits it like that. Starfield definitely didn't. When I was playing Starfield, I was constantly being hit with this feeling of like, this game doesn't make sense. Like, why is it that the most dangerous main outpost of this pirate org is mere kilometers away from the only city on the whole planet? Yet they're talking about like finding new territories on this planet. Why'd you guys settle so close then? This stuff doesn't really make sense when you come across it. And those are the kinds of little things that I think, the little details that make a game really feel like the world you're in matters.
Yeah, I think a lot of developers are, this is almost a little bit of it's a related topic, but I think that one of the big challenges in making space games is dealing with the amount of content that you need to develop, given that people are expecting there to be lots of worlds to explore. You've got this massive play space, right? A space game is about big open spaces, planets and moons and star systems, right? Well, there's only so many man hours you can put into a game. Where do you put it? How do you make these planets feel like they're worth visiting? Starfield tried to make a big scope game, maybe not having the time to invest in the technology necessary to make it seamless. But even if they had done things seamlessly, as you pointed out, because they had to automate a lot of the process, the result was a less handcrafted feel. Going back to Red Dead, compare the map size to anything in Starfield that's not even big as a single tile, but it feels dense. It feels huge. It feels alive because the developers had time to focus on this small area and craft a story behind each and every part of it. And that's such a, how do you do that for a space game? I don't think it's really, I'm not sure it's possible right now. Even with AI the way it is right now, I don't think it's possible. And unfortunately, expectations are that these big studios, because they're big budgets, they're going to be able to do something like Red Dead, but on the scale of a star system, or the scale of several star systems. And like, I see in the comments, so like, this might sound like I'm crazy to some of you guys listening to this. Like, you might be thinking, of course, Morphologists, I know we shouldn't have these expectations, but I'm telling you that some people do have these expectations. And that's why it's so important to set those expectations correctly and not let the hype run away because you think it's going to make you more money.
Well, I think that's an especially interesting topic when you consider the topic of today, No Man's Sky, which we're about to get into. But the same studio is working on another game, Light No Fire, that simulates an entire planet. And that's kind of its claim to fame so far. But they haven't released any other details. And you can only imagine what kind of expectations that's setting for people. That should be an interesting one to follow as well, though. But ultimately...
It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, it does sound like space gamers are looking for exploration. They're looking to scratch that curious itch. They're looking to experience something that's a little bit different, but is also offering you a cohesive experience in that. And
yeah, I think that's generally true. And the reason why we got into this conversation about expectations is because it's hard to generalize about what everybody wants, what everybody is looking for in a space game. Some people are content to have a single planet or a couple planets to play on, where others they want an infinite universe like No Man's Sky. So it's hard to pin down what everybody wants. But I think generally they want a feeling of exploration, finding things new, going to space, feeling like a space person. Yeah.
So let's talk about expectations that were set with No Man's Sky. And I want to briefly...
I think that's a good segue.
Yeah. I want to briefly start with its launch, because No Man's Sky had, up until that point, one of the worst game launches I think we had ever seen, partially because of expectations. Do you remember how, like, the difference between what people were thinking of the game before it came out and then what happened after it came out, like in that immediate first couple months?
I think it's the absolute perfect example of where sometimes people's expectations don't at all match up with the technology limitations that we have today. They employed something that at the time was like super exciting, like these generated worlds, procedural generation was like the thing they made popular. Like before that, it wasn't something that was like hugely discussed in the industry. But for them, they're like, how are we doing these infinite planets? Well, we're doing procedural generation through all of these like very cool formulas to make all these different planets. And the reality of when it releases, people realized there are real limits to procedural generation. Like at some point, the algorithm, it may be complex mathematically, our minds can recognize the patterns and see the repetition over all of these different worlds. And that wasn't the only reason why people were disappointed in No Man's Sky. So I don't want to say that's the only reason, but it's definitely a big part of it, is that people were expecting this big open infinite universe to explore with constantly new things. And these worlds look amazing. There's like people like ships flying around and animals moving around and they look amazing and stuff. Well, really the core of the issue of its release was the procedural generation tech just not being quite there. It produced some really derpy looking animals, like with completely lopsided looking body shapes that made no sense. I mean, there's some pretty hilarious meme videos you could probably still find out on the internet about that.
And the planets were just boring.
Yeah, they were really boring. A lot of it was like copy pasted stuff all over the surface. And I think even though on paper it was a lot of stuff, at some point it just started to become really samey, didn't it? Like there was some stuff it definitely did well. Like it captured like this really artistic, beautiful 1970s idea of space travel that was really compelling in the original art and the concept. It's a very stylized game. But once you dove into it, it definitely didn't have the depth that I think people were expecting that to have in this game. And in this case, actually, I don't think people are so much to blame for their expectations, because this is a long time ago now. Before No Man's Sky, I don't think there were a lot of projects that really come to mind about people like a developer not properly setting expectations. If anybody can be accused of setting expectations poorly, it would be Sean Murray and his presentations on what we should expect for No Man's Sky leading up to it. He really hyped it up and he probably let his enthusiasm and excitement for his own project cloud his judgment and get in the way of really thoroughly self-analyzing the way he's presenting the project and setting people's expectations correctly. But without No Man's Sky, I don't think we would have learned the importance so much for setting expectations correctly.
I wish that all these other companies would have learned that importance too.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's shocking that so many companies still haven't learned from No Man's Sky. But amazingly, there's a good there's a good ending to this story that we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, the start was not good for Sean Murray and Hello Games. It was really shocking and unfortunate.
But I think a big part of it also comes from the really a lot of what the boogeyman ends up being in the gaming industry, but that is the publishers. I don't think the game was exclusively or was published necessarily by Sony, but they were a big part of the marketing, and it was. I think this might have been from the Internet Historian video on it or something, or maybe one of the other reports, but I believe I did end up hearing that Sony was a big part of pushing Hello Games to continue to make this feel like a bigger game, feel like something that was going to be more substantial than maybe they were initially planning, because it was a big selling point for the PS4 at the time. I think it was like one of the early games. I don't even remember when the PS4 came out anymore. Jeez, but it was really big pushed by Sony, and just in general seemed like it was being made out to be a game that was bigger than it was at the time. But do you feel like it's reached what they initially sold at this point?
Well, I know there's some people who are going to disagree with me on this, but I actually do think that they've not only met the what people expected, or at least what I expected from their initial presentations, they've exceeded it. They've gone past it. They've gone so far past it that, like that stuff with the launch, you can't even see in the rearview mirror anymore, because they've continued to 8 years on without charging for a DLC, continue to support this game. What other games out there are still producing content 8 years on to improve the game? I don't know many. I know Star Citizen's one of them, but they've actually technically released yet. No Man's Sky did release. They made a lot of money, releasing the game. They could have walked away from the project, and Sean Murray could have quietly retired comfortably with millions of dollars at a nice villa resort or somewhere for the rest of his life. But he didn't, and I'm thankful he didn't, because No Man's Sky is now a really excellent game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about not giving up on a game. Like, there's so many good game ideas that didn't even ever get to launch, or maybe did launch and didn't do well and got given up on or pulled or something. And there's so many people out there who are looking for those games still, or looking for a replacement for those games because they had a good idea. Like, I'm working on a video right now to kind of talk about games that have been canceled that could have been great, and No Man's Sky is just such a message to the industry of what can happen if you stick with a game. But it ends up coming back to money. And like, how do you think they've managed to support a game this long with this many updates and continue to improve it without having to charge for those updates or introduce a subscription or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I would love to hear what what Sean Murray would say, or anybody from the Hello Games team that's been there for a long time. But from what I've gathered, I think they've continued to get new sales. There are still people buying No Man's Sky. And I think they are, because No Man's Sky appeals to a much wider audience than the genre typically appeals to. It's very colorful. It gets at that more, like I was talking about earlier, that innate part of human nature of wanting to explore and see what's out there. It kind of like scratches that itch for a lot of people. And maybe it doesn't do it in a way that's super detailed like Star Citizen, but it does it in a way that's done well enough that you can sit down and you can enjoy it and play it and keep finding new things and whatnot and so forth. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here with answering this question, but I think it's because it's doing something that not a lot of games. There aren't a lot of games in this genre that are competition for this game. There are almost none. And the one that is still around, Star Citizen, well, it's not appealing to a wide audience right now. So there's yeah, there aren't. I mean, Elite Dangerous is on the downturn. Starfield is completely deflated. Like nobody's interested in talking about that game anymore, sadly, because of the flop at launch. And there are some new games coming this year. Don't get me wrong, but there just isn't a whole lot out there to scratch that itch, that the itch to find things out there, to discover things that No Man's Sky does. So I think there's always new gamers coming on that'll be interested in the subject, and that's how they've gotten more and more funding for the game. Just getting more people to buy in. That's it.
Real quick segue, because I do think that this year is seeing more big name additions than normal years. A lot of that is downloadable stuff. So like Star Citizen, obviously they have 4.0 allegedly is supposed to be coming out. I don't even think actually that needs to be in this conversation. But we also got Star Wars Outlaws, which is a pretty big deal title, just as being the first modern Star Wars open world game, I would say. I think you could kind of call KOTOR open world, but even that was it's not quite like this, and it's not modern by any means.
No, and it was very stylized too.
Yeah. And then Starfield has a new DLC, I think, coming out this year. I don't know what exactly is going on with that. But even both of those games come off a little bit more as action adventure games than space exploration, like something like Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, or No Man's Sky.
I think that's another important note. I think No Man's Sky is more about you're the protagonist and you're exploring. There is a story in No Man's Sky. I don't want to get anything wrong here, but I think the appeal of it is more about the exploration and finding stuff and for the sake of finding things, and there are other things to progress in the game. I mean, there are progression elements of the game, but generally that's the point. But those other games are more about the story. There's the actual story going on there, and in both Star Wars Outlaws. I'm sorry, but was the other example you gave
Starfield?
Starfield,
DLC?
yeah. There's a story in Starfield, yeah. Although Starfield probably is a bit closer to No Man's Sky, I think, than Outlaws, because I think that's why so many people were so excited about Starfield, is because it seemed like it was going to be a No Man's Sky, but more detailed and maybe mature looking.
Yeah, people were calling it No Man's Skyrim.
Yeah, No Man's Skyrim. I think initially, I think people still call it that actually, and I think that's because it was also scratching that itch, but it had a story. Unfortunately, it didn't end up scratching the itch when it released for a lot of people. But that's the impression people had from the advertisements for the game before it came out.
So why do you think that, and maybe this does happen with Starfield, but why do you think No Man's Sky did such a good job of continuing to bring in new sales? Like, from what I know, they're not selling a bunch of DLC or a bunch of microtransactions or selling a currency.
Sorry, you said Starfield. You mean No Man's Sky?
Yeah, sorry, No Man's Sky. They're not selling a bunch of stuff that keeps them going, but they're putting out these free updates. Why do you think Starfield can't follow in its path and make a redemption arc and continue to bring in new players?
I think it can. I absolutely think it can. But I think the problem is, initially I want to say this, that we didn't know Sean Murray was going to come back and keep supporting the game. He said he would, but everybody says that they're going to fix it when there's a bad launch. Everybody does. Every single developer said, we learned some lessons. We're hearing you out there. We're going to try to fix this, blah, 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 blah. And very few actually follow through with that. It's quietly, forgotten and moved on from. So we don't know if there's going to be a redemption arc for Starfield. I sure hope there will be. But there are signs that there are some issues with the engine that make it difficult for them to solve some of the some of the issues that some people feel are core issues with the game, specifically the seamless transitions part in that scope of the game. But I absolutely think that they could come back and do more things. But would Bethesda be willing to do that when they've got other projects on the horizon that require a huge amount of time investment and could be more successful now that this isn't done what they expected it would do for them. You know, the Elder Scrolls, was it Elder Scrolls 6, you know, has been hinted at in development for a long time, and a lot of people are anticipating that. You know, they may end up just deciding to put all of their devs on that and forget about Starfield and just not support it anymore after the Shattered Space update.
I guess that's really big, is that they, just looking it up here, I mean, they've got their own game engine. They are, as far as I know, they are self-published, I believe. So they've got a lot of control to make the decisions for themselves. And, you know, a company like Bethesda, who has to meet Microsoft expectations now, not to mention their own ZeniMax expectations, is like this industry that we're in, the age and the phase that it's in, is just steamrolling through to figure out what works for the company and then stick with that. Whereas No Man's Sky found something that didn't initially work for the company, mainly when it launched, but they stuck with it anyways, and now it is.
Yeah, I think you've actually brought up an interesting point that I want to touch on. Is that Hello Games, while they were published by Sony initially, are still an independent company, and there's no company that would allow a studio to continue working on a game like this if they were owned by a big publishing firm. No Man's Sky would be dead, 100%, if it was fully owned by Sony and that Sony were calling the shots. Hello Games thankfully called their own shots, and Sean Murray said, we're going to keep making this game. And that's the only reason it is where it is now, why they got a redemption arc. Bethesda is not in that category. They are, like you said, owned by Microsoft. They have shareholder expectations. They have investment this is an investment for them, and they want to see return on that investment. And the space genre, why we've not seen big games with big scopes in this genre, is because of the cost involved in making a space game. The scope is so huge, with so much developer time required to make a game like this, that it just does not make any financial sense when you look at other games that require so much less effort and could produce way more money. Look at FIFA, for example. It's just the same game every single year, over and over again, charged literally the same game. They just charge it for every year, and they block you from being able to play the previous year's version. It's obscene. It's horrible. Yet it's the most profitable game that EA sells. How can any investor look at that and say, I don't want to do that. I want to make a risky space game? Like, most people, unless they're like really enthusiastic about the space genre, aren't going to be okay with people experimenting and taking risks with the space genre, which is what it is. Because going back to the technology part of this genre, I'm sorry to say this, if you don't know, but our technology cannot create a universe yet. It really can't. Like, it's too difficult to create a fully simulated, highly detailed universe where there's stuff to do and it feels like a living, breathing universe. We're just not there yet. We're getting there. People are working on it, you know, at CIG and stuff with Star Citizen, but, you know, see how they've struggled like hell to do that. And they're still nowhere near making a finished game yet. I'm sorry to say.
I mean,
you know,
all of the unique but big space games, from Space Engineers that you used to cover, to Elite Dangerous, to Star Citizen, to No Man's Sky, all of these kind of high profile, even Starfield was like 9 years in development. It wasn't the only thing they were working on, but like all of these games have been long-term projects that really only succeed because they're weird. Like, they're all strange in their own way.
They, with the exception of Star Citizen, and even Star Citizen does have a scope limitation, as big as it is, they had limited scopes. No Man's Sky, procedural generation, not going to worry about multiplayer. We're going to worry about the discovery part of the experience. This is about exploring, and because they focused on that part of the game experience, they didn't have to focus too much attention on the hard other things. And because they also said, we're going to make this stylized, they didn't have to worry about making the planet surfaces too realistic, right? Starfield, again, limited scope. They focused on making a story about, you know, these people and this. I don't want to go too much into the Starborn and what have you. The story, it's not important, but they had a specific scope that they were focusing on. It's not that they said, let's do everything. They limited it. Every single one of these examples, they had to have a point where they said, we can't do any more than this. And they're not, and that's why none of them really are that full space game that people are looking for that has everything in it yet. Because nobody can really do it. It's
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting because investing 9 years, I mean, it must be the biggest disappointment for some people out there. And I'm talking people who are on the development and production side to invest so much time and effort. And again, Bethesda was not working on Starfield alone for 9 years, but there were people
No.
at Bethesda who that was their sole duty for 9 years. And to do that and then watch the way that it was received after all that time must be incredibly disappointing and a big sign to other people that maybe we shouldn't do something like this. Maybe we should either take a shot at a smaller project or work on something, like you said, that's guaranteed to bring success, to bring reinvestment from EA or Bethesda or whoever your big, your big gaming daddy is, and make sure to play it safe. All of the companies that keep making these games that are like fairly successful or breakout hits, sometimes they come from small publishers that are willing to make more of a chance, or they're self-published from a company that knows what the heck they want to do with their game. And No Man's Sky really captured that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these companies are independent, with the exception of Bethesda. They're more independent companies that can try to take more of a risk, and they have, that's how you get attention too. Is you take risks and you try to make something that it captures people's imagination and excites them. So, I mean, that's the problem with, I think, going back to Starfield with them. I don't know if they're going to try to deliver a comeback like No Man's Sky, because they've got a budget, they've got investors. They probably want them to move on to the next project and forget about the lack of commercial success of the release of Starfield.
Do you think they're going to still go with the trilogy for that series?
No, I think it's going to be abandoned, and quietly abandoned is my guess. So, there's too much to fix and not enough money to do it, for the way that people, I think, want that game to be fixed. And they could do it. I'm not saying they couldn't do it. They definitely could, but I don't know if they're willing to, given the limitations that they've set, they've got set for them.
There's the landscape's really changed since the game came out, with Game Pass, with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard King, and what is it? Activision King Blizzard? I don't even know how they say it, but the whole idea of what a game needs to be for a company that's mixed up so much in all of this investment and the pure animal industry that is the gaming world now, it sucks. A lot of this is just so driven by money now that it's a disappointment. I was initially, I was looking at this as the Mass Effect for this generation. It really could have been the kind of out of nowhere space RPG that comes out and surprises people with an initial game and then spawns a great trilogy from it, kind of changes the space. But I don't really see it anymore. And that really sucks. I was excited for that. Even if Starfield initially wasn't great, I was very excited to see what they might do with the sequels for it.
Yeah, it really does suck. But I mean, that's the reality of this genre. Which is what makes No Man's Sky such a surprise in the genre.
Absolutely.
And such a delight, really. Actually, that's why I'm still excited about it when something new comes out for it.
It is one of the best stories in gaming I think we've seen in the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
Or in the last decade at least. It's really inspiring. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening now are kind of wondering a little more about the details of like what actually who the game's made for and if they would be interested in playing it. I know we're now 40 minutes into the podcast and you finally get the good details, but a lot of people who are listening to this podcast probably are used to listening to Star Citizen stuff. And that is a group of people with willpower. Good on y'all for holding the line, as they say. But those are people who haven't had much of a storyline to follow or like a main drive in what they're supposed to be doing in playing the game. And I actually think that this is something that catches people with No Man's Sky. We've been talking about how it's a lot based around the exploration and just kind of finding stuff and doing things. But do you feel like it does enough to still bring people back week after week? Like, is there enough of a storyline? Is there enough of a long-term narrative that it can capture your attention for a long time?
So this is where I think that it no, whether or not you're interested in No Man's Sky entirely depends on what you're looking for in a space game. I know people who've got hundreds of hours in this game. I know my friend Jimmy, who helped me actually find that floating planet for the video. Floating island planet for the video. He's already got like 100 hours in since the release of 5.0. That's how much he's playing. He's playing a ton. But some other people will pick it up and say, this thing sucks. I hate this game, because they're looking for something very different. And maybe they're not articulating it for themselves, and they shouldn't be expected to do so. But let me try to articulate it here. If you're looking for a game that will allow you to explore infinite planets, and you understand that it's a video game and there are limitations to technology, but you want to find some cool, beautiful things, and maybe set down and design some buildings, and maybe find some new things and name them, or I don't know, collect some of the rare things that you only find out there by playing a lot, because there's some specific types of worlds and loot that you can only find after like exploring quite a lot. There's very rare things to find in No Man's Sky. Then you're gonna like this game if you like exploration and seeing things new and always seeing something new. And you don't really care so much about playing with other people. Like, you're not really into the multiplayer experience, but you're okay with sometimes playing with friends. And if you want to play with friends, you can. Like that'll be perfect for you. But if you're looking for a game where you want to do like territory control, you want to do PvP, you like DCS, that kind of like very detailed flight experience that's highly simulated, and you want high detail worlds and everything very, very realistic, and you want a very strong story where the strong protagonist, where, there's a start and there's an end, then you're going to hate No Man's Sky, because that's not what No Man's Sky is. That's not what they're appealing to. That's not the scope of the game. That's not their focus. They do have an interesting story, but it's very philosophical. It's a very like deep, about the existence of humanity and like what's real, and does that matter if it's real? It's very up there, and it's not like voice acted or done in a way where there's a lot of like mocap like modern games. So that's definitely not its main focus. And for people who do like this genre of space exploration, deep philosophical thinking about the where do we come from? What is the source of existence? Would it matter whether or not we're living in a simulation? Like, these questions are all really interesting, but it won't be interesting to everybody. Not everybody's going to find that enough to draw them in to want to keep looking.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say specifically whether or not people will generally enjoy it. But if you find what I said attractive about the experience of No Man's Sky, then I think you'll like it. And I also want to add that there's been a ton of extra content, new content added in since the release of the game initially, that you only can find through playing the game and exploring and building bases and crafting things, and again looking for like there's for example, there's these new ships that you can find, and there's a secret way to get them, these dissonant Atlas ships that look really cool, or there's only specific locations you can find certain types of freighters or certain types of exotic ships. There's also a new system where you can build ships by finding crash ships and taking the parts off of them and building your own in the space station. Like, all these take time, and they will, you'll easily be 40 hours in before you complete any of these things, and you probably still won't have everything done yet. If you find those things interesting, you'll have lots of stuff to do with No Man's Sky. Personally, I'm like looking right now on how to get my own staff multi-tool, which is really cool. The cool staff you see them using in the previews. Like, that's a new multi-tool that you can find, but they don't just give it to you. You need to like work. You really have to work at it to find one of those things. And so, like, if that kind of thing interests you, you're going to love it. That's what's drawing me in. That's what's made me interested. And then there's also something called expeditions, where they have like a kind of a story-esque experience where you start a new character. It throws you into a new world. You have some objectives that you have to follow that brings you from world to world. You're starting from, basically, it's like a zero to hero experience. Mm-hmm. These expeditions are. And then by doing these expeditions, there's a story, and you get unique and interesting parts that you can bring back to your main character. that you can't get anywhere else, like really cool ships or really cool armor or really cool multi-tools, really cool building parts or decorations to put in your home. Also that brings to me that brings me to base building. I'm not rambling on. Am I? Am I okay
No,
here?
no. Keep going.
Okay.
Tell us more.
And like for me, I'm an architect. I love building things. I love designing things. The building system in No Man's Sky is fantastic. Sure, it's got its limitations, and most building systems in games do have limitations. But it's good enough that I've thoroughly enjoyed finding new ways to make combinations with the parts that we have to make a really cool building. And I've probably built like 10 by now. And just this recent past week since I started playing, I've built 3 more, and I've really enjoyed doing them. I actually want to keep building more bases and new cool exotic locations and new cool planets that I found. So yeah, I personally think that No Man's Sky has a ton to offer right now, and that it is genuinely insanely good from where we've been from where we were originally. Like this 5.0 overhaul is great. And visually it's also much better now too. They've added like really cool water effects now that looks real beautiful and realistic. I mean, it's got some tiling I've seen here and there, but it's good enough. Like it's stylized. I'm okay with that. And the clouds look great too. So yeah, I mean, like I've kind of just blurted everything out here, but I've been holding it in this entire podcast up until now. But I'm excited to talk about No Man's Sky. Like, it's a really genuinely exciting game to talk about. I'm not like paid to say any of this. No Man's Sky, Hello Games did not reach out to me. I've just been excited for it. Finally, I'm excited to finally
paid.
be.
It's always paid.
I know there's some people like this is an advertisement or something. It's not. I think this goes back to something I was telling you about before we did this podcast about the way I format videos. I think sometimes the way I script videos, it can come off as too polished. I think there's a point you can get to where your content seems too sharp, too well put together, where it comes off as like a corporate advertisement. And I may have gotten to that point with some of the videos I've done, and I need to pull back from that and bring back my personality a bit more and not speak so much off my script and just speak from the heart, because I think that's what people like genuinely. I think for me, when I watch somebody who's like genuinely excited about something, it gets me excited. Like, he's excited, I'm excited, let's do this. Have you ever watched Adam Savage talk about anything on his channel? Like he's got such charisma. Like he's always so excited about the things he's talking about, and whether like any other person talking about like whittling away at this little prop would be incredibly boring, but the way he talks about it is so exciting. Like he's so genuinely interested in what he's doing that it makes me want to know more about it. So, anyway.
I mean, there's like a really passionate community to No Man's Sky.
Yeah, there is.
It is always like, even through from the initial launch and through all these updates, I'm looking at the page right now, and they're on 5.0 for this game, but every single patch, almost every single major update had like 4 to 8 smaller updates in between them. So they're like 20 to 30 updates into this right now. And throughout all of this, I have seen a dedicated community sticking by No Man's Sky. And I think you nailed something there. It's really a sandbox game. This is a game for the people who don't need a major objective to know what to go do. Now, I am not that kind of person. I have always been very much objective based. While I like to go and do other things, I've always tried to give myself one objective. Usually I take that from the game, whatever it's telling me to do, and then I do stuff around that to kind of enhance the experience. I jumped into No Man's Sky, this update, for the first time just yesterday. Actually, it took a while to get around to it. And I went out and I just started mining salt. Like, it was some planet that I was playing on back in 2022, and I guess with this update, they added some new resources on it, and the biomes had changed, and I went and mined a couple things, flew to a space station, sold a few things, and realized, oh crap, salt is pretty valuable here. So I went and I started mining it, and I was just like chilling and enjoying the world and the things around me as a salt miner on some random planet that I had discovered. And I was like, this is what this game's about. It's not necessarily the most epic thing, but it really does allow you to kind of make a story and have just a good, calm time on your own and enjoying the content, the tools that they give you to do something out there.
That's really, I think that's really interesting. there's actually a lot to do in No Man's Sky right now, more so than there ever was in the past. But I think what people get caught up on getting back into it is that it doesn't throw in your face exactly what you need to do or what you should be doing. It's not like it's an on rails game. I think that there's this thing in psychology. Let me talk about something a little bit different, but that's related, so that I think it illustrates the point. Is that people in advertisement have figured out that giving people too many choices actually hurts selling a product, and that you need to give people enough choices where they feel like they've got freedom, but not too many that they feel overwhelmed. And No Man's Sky is just kind of like a 360 degree, and I'm not even talking about a planar experience. It's, like it's 3D in space. You've got so much stuff to do and see that it's easy to just be not sure what to do and just do nothing. And just go back to what you were doing originally when the first game came out. But there are goals that you can give for yourself to do in this game. For me, like I want to find staff. I want to find a special ship from the that are from the Atlas, the Dissonance. Like it's a cool like robot looking ship. I want one of those. Like these take time and effort to get, and so these become my goals. But they don't have to be your goals. But there are goals to have if you want a goal. It's just that you need to set it for yourself. And be okay with setting it for yourself. Not everybody wants that out of a video game, and that's fine. Some people want to be more on rails. But just like you said, like maybe it's just to be, just to go mind salt. And that's cool. And that's fine. And as long as you enjoy it.
It's easy to do if you cover Star Citizen as well. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, like virtually anything in this game with a loop is going to be more fun right now than Star Citizen. I'm sorry to say, because the loops in Star Citizen, even they admit that there are problems with the loops in the game. So like, this is not just somebody being negative about it. Like they admit it too, that they need to work on it. So there are loops in the game to enjoy. But I think what's really great about this game, you made me think about something else just now about the chillness of it, right? It's a very positive game. Like the style of it's very bright and happy. And there are some scary parts of it, like the beasts thing and stuff, but they're all still kind of cartoony and they're not really scary. It's mostly a positive, fun experience. And I think that's appealed to a much wider audience as well. I was watching Expat Brat actually last night, and she was playing with her mom, and her mom was into it. And I was thinking, that's interesting. Like, I would not think that your family, like, I don't know her mom, but my guess is, like she probably wouldn't be interested in Star Citizen so much. Like maybe I'm wrong on this, but like it seems more of an approachable game for anybody.
Definitely.
Because it's not going to bite your head off when you go into it. It's
definitely
yeah.
It's much more approachable, yeah. And the positivity, like as you've been talking about, it kind of was looking a little bit at the updates and the things they're saying. It's based off of a lot of that 80s sci-fi of Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein. Heinlein? I don't even know his name. But these people are people who were very well known and famous for their styles and their positive outlook of futurism and space travel. And they really captured it here. Like the artwork, the music, the colors, like you're saying, all of it is just very approachable. It is the most approachable space experience I can think of. And on top of that, it's cross-platform, so you've not only got anywhere that you can play it from, like literally, I think it said it was on iPad maybe, but like you've got this on the Switch, you've got this in Xbox, computers, on VR. You can play it in virtual reality.
I'm pretty sure the Switch GPU right now, because it's so old, is actually slower than modern iPhone GPUs. Like, I'm pretty sure. It's just like, does the API, is it able to run on an iPhone? That's the only question, whether they programmed it to run on it. But I'm pretty sure an iPhone would run it better than a Switch.
It does say, it says iPad OS. It doesn't say iOS, but they could probably make it work if they really wanted to, and maybe with these newer updates, possibly not. But it is an incredibly accessible, approachable game. And one of the things that's always stuck out to me about the progression, you were talking about, it's very there's a lot of rare things you can unlock. So they've got the things in there for the people who are working hard. But something I've always loved about this game is that they have the aliens speaking a different language, and you can just go and learn that language one word at a time. So every time you're showing up to a space station, maybe you know a little bit more of what these aliens are saying to you. Maybe you can do a little bit more when you're trading with them or communicate just a bit more. And I don't know if that leads anywhere, but it still gives you a sense of making progress. And that's one of the most important things of a game, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's definitely progression, but it's different than other games. And as long as you know what you're getting yourself into and that's the kind of thing you like, your expectations are set correctly, I think you're really going to enjoy. You would really enjoy No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
I do. I think we should hop in a session sometime together. I think that'd be real fun.
Oh, heck yeah, dude. I'm really looking to try and get into it. I don't get much time to play games because I've been so hyper focused on covering one game for so long and talking more about development than the game itself. But I would, I'd love to be able to just like get into the game and try it out a bit. We'll have to talk more about that. But let's talk about how and where this game could improve, because it's not all good. I mean,
no, it's not.
It's a great game and it's fun to play, but it's been here for 8 years and it's still updating, and a lot of people still feel like it hasn't quite reached its pinnacle. And Hello Games is about to start their next game, right? They've been working on their next game for years now, and even a lot of the stuff we're seeing in this Worlds update is stuff that they have developed because they're working on this other game. So what are a couple things, or maybe one main thing that you think they really could do to still improve this game past where it is now?
I think that one of the worst aspects of the game is the multiplayer experience. It's still a bit problematic, specifically with like playing with friends. There aren't a whole lot of like group mechanics. I would like to see some more community tools in this game. Like just in my brief time revisiting the game, it's still limited to groups of 4 people. You can get, I don't know what the limit is. I think it's like maybe 32 people you can see in your experience in your environment, even if there are more. So you can see other people flying and playing the game. Like the expeditions, I think, are a great example of that, because everybody's going to the same planet to start off with for the Zero to Hero thing. So you see a bunch of people on the planet building bases, doing things and stuff, and you can run across them. But by and large, the game doesn't really support that so much. It's never really been so much about that, but I think there still is a community there, and it would be really great to say build a guild hall to get together with, and have maybe some territory or something like that, that you claim as a guild, and being able to launch with maybe like 10 people instead of 4. These just small things. Better net coding in general would be great. There were some issues with desync and people not seeing the same things. Like on my client, it was daytime. On my friend's client, it was nighttime. They couldn't see parts of my base. We both tried using a refinery, and it got bugged, and neither of us could use it anymore. I had to abandon it because it thought both of us were using it simultaneously. So there are a lot of like these kinds of multiplayer issues in the game, and they don't happen super often. I've largely enjoyed my experience playing with friends. It's enhanced the experience, I would say, to play with friends. There are still these issues that I think they need to sort out to really make this, to fully round out the experience of this game.
You said they could launch with, you can launch with 4, and you'd like to launch with 10. How many people in general can you kind of get in a session together? Like if you did want to make a group base and have all your friends come join you, how many people could come by and hang out?
I think, like I said, I think it's like 32 or something. I'm pretty sure it's still doing peer-to-peer or something like that. There's a host in this session.
Okay.
It's not like it's hosted on a server somewhere. So there's not really server architect. Well, there are servers. This is being hosted somewhere, I think, in some way. I don't know exactly how it works, but there's still peer-to-peer. So that brings with it some inherent issues. Like hacking and stuff is fairly easy in this game, apparently. Cheating fairly easy because a lot of the files are on your system, and you can kind of break things pretty easily by altering the game files, and I don't want to go too far into it because I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think you should just try to enjoy playing the game. But there are these problems, and ultimately that's not part of the focus of the game. So I wouldn't blame them if they didn't go back and fix some of these issues. But it would be nice to see them do that. Other than that, visually I could still see some improvements, like or just like with the gameplay, planets in general. Like I could see the planets still being improved somewhat. Like the people are pointing out deeper oceans. I think it'd be nice to have deeper oceans. I think it'd be nice to have more varied and realistic looking topography. And it would be cool to also be able to EVA in space in some
Oh,
way, have
yeah.
a space part of the experience. That's still
Yeah.
not a thing. You can't get out of your spaceship in space.
So it's
and the flight model sometimes still feels a little bit weird, like almost like you're on rails a little bit when you're flying. You're not, like you can fly around and stuff, but it's not like Star Citizen where you can strafe left and right. Maybe I'm not asking for that kind of system, but just maybe a little bit more of a feeling of control over the ship would be really nice.
it's not surprising, I think, to most people that the hardest part of this game is the multiplayer aspects of it. Everything
Yeah.
that I have seen about gaming points to the fact that creating the more people you need to connect in a game environment, the harder the game gets to make, which is why MMOs are just so expensive to make. And that might be a big part of how they've been able to keep this game going and keep the cost down, is they've never dove that much into the multiplayer aspect besides just
Yeah.
more of a
I think
cooperative system.
the reason why they've not expanded the scope, my guess would be, into more multiplayer stuff is because if you start bringing things like PvP into the mix and you've got peer-to-peer connections and cheating so easy, then how do you solve that problem without making drastic changes to the way server architecture works and actually starting to host servers? Which, by the way, I think this is a big part of why they were able to keep developing the game, because they don't have to pay for, say, a huge amount of servers like Star Citizen does right now. Like Amazon Web Services hosts Star Citizen servers, and they are not cheap to host those servers. They are running the highest end servers that they have. As much as people meme on them, they are running the best servers that they have, and it's still not good enough, and it's still super expensive. Like it's absolutely super expensive. So, they would have to spend a lot more money to make the game more conducive to a PvP territory control type environment, and that's why I think they're not going into that at all, and why we probably should never expect them to, unless they decide to go, full steam ahead on putting everybody onto it instead of onto a new game. And we already know that they're working on a new game, so I don't think that we should expect huge changes in No Man's Sky from here on out. It'll be more additions and stuff. That's it.
I think that's a very conscious decision too. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry for PvPers, and I'm guessing most people who would react poorly to what I'm about to say probably aren't getting this far into a podcast about No Man's Sky, but PvP is not super popular. That introducing that to the game, not only, like you said, means they have to consider a lot more of how the systems interact with each other, but it also means they have to consider how players are going to interact with each other. And this is a super accessible game, like we said. This is a game that is open to all. It interests a lot of different people who probably wouldn't normally be into space games. And to keep that going, you kind of want to keep your game more straightforward and with less variables that are just going to upend everything you might have learned in the first 20 hours of playing the game. You spend all this time on a planet that's off in the distance that nobody is a part of, and then as you get closer to the center of the galaxy or whatever, the universe, whatever the way they do it, suddenly you start running into players and you're like, wait a second, I have to now be concerned about how stealthy my base is, or how much emissions I'm putting out, or where I'm going to mine because somebody else might be there to kill me. And that really does change the way that people look at a game or even advertise a game. And for a lot of people, that just wipes it off the list of if they want to play it or not.
I think it definitely narrows the people who would be able to get into this game, because it become much more time intensive. It would be much more difficult. I think you've said it really well, but I do want to point out that No Man's Sky does have the possibility of PvP. It's only just a switch that you can turn on or off. Literally,
Well, there you go.
There's an option in the game settings where you can say, who can you PvP with? Friends, none, or anyone. And that's it. They
That's
literally can't hurt you if you turn it off.
Yeah.
I don't want that in Star Citizen, but that is a thing in the game, and that's only possible because of the peer-to-peer connections and the way that the servers work. The servers, they're not servers, they're your computer. So.
And that is the absolute joy of different types of games for different types of experiences. I love that, man. I can't stand how much people get into competition mode whenever a new space game is coming out. I mean, you've covered Star Citizen long enough. Every space game that comes out is going to kill Star Citizen, or every space game that comes out doesn't matter because Star Citizen might do this or that, whatever. It's just nice to get more space games. It really is. I hope, that's why I hope Starfield continues, because it's
really
not
so
No Man's
too.
Sky. It's not Elite Dangerous. It's not Star Citizen.
I think that there's been a lot of people saying that there's the problems in Starfield can't be fixed. I think it can be fixed. It's a question of whether or not they want to put the effort in to do so. And I know it's a lot of effort, and it's probably not going to be super profitable to fix that. But I genuinely hope that they would, because there's still a lot of potential in that game, and I know they try to do a lot of cool things with it, and ultimately the technology fell a bit short because they didn't have the time, or they didn't think it was important. I think some of it was that they underestimated the importance of the simulating some of that part of the experience, like simulating the space to ground thing. Sorry, is my connection getting worse? I see I'm getting really fuzzy.
But it looks like it's just on the end of OBS, because you look great on my own thing. Let me try and
That's really weird.
Renew that. Yeah, everything else looks really good. It's just
OBS being derpy.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep trying and fixing that. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's like I think the spaceships are really cool, and like the style of No Man's Sky is nice, and I think there's some merits to the ground exploration. I think that the planets look fantastic. Like sure, it's a limited play space, but I think it looks really good. And I would love to keep exploring. I'd love to explore with other people. I'd love to have co-op. There's so much cool stuff that they could do with this. Add more side stories and stuff into the game. More modding support would be great. Like without so many limitations, without that stupid, why did they decide to charge people for mods like that? Like, what a bad move after 76 fell so flat and got so many people angry. Honestly, they've made such strange decisions for Starfield, which just makes me think that they're not going to go back and fix it. They keep making weird decisions.
Yeah, and it's those kinds of small decisions that can really screw it all up, right? It could be a good game, but if you're not going to support it correctly, it can lead to a lot of problems. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's going on with the camera here. Might be a CPU problem on my end. That old 7800 X3D can't handle a video feed. Oh no. But that's technology for you folks. Okay, not to get too distracted. To wrap things up, I would like to know, we've been hopping around the subject quite a bit for this whole show, but officially speaking, what do you think Star Citizen could learn from No Man's Sky in helping themselves maybe honestly becoming a better game, but also just like win more of the public's goodwill?
This guy won the goodwill of the follower base by persevering despite negativity, by continuing to keep their heads down and deliver. But importantly, when they delivered things, they didn't caveat it by charging a huge amount of money for each thing. I think that CIG, one of the things they need to stop doing is thinking of ways to monetize every new thing that they do. I know that they've got to make money for funding, but it feels like often that when given the choice to whether or not they should release something for free or they should attach a price tag for it, that they more often than not choose to attach a price tag for it. What do I mean? Specifically, for example, Like the subscriber gear is often very cool. It's a great way to get people to want to subscribe for Star Citizen. But when's the last time we got a cool set of armor that you could find somewhere to loot in the game? Or a cool skin that you could unlock through some means in the game? Or a cool ship that you could find and unlock some way? I mean, some of these mechanics don't even exist. So they couldn't even do it if they wanted to. But I think it's genuinely just, generally speaking, it's just like a sense of goodwill towards the followers to like, here's a nice treat for you guys to say thank you for your support, and you don't have to pay us for it. I think that's what No Man's Sky has done so well, is like a lot of the things, everything that they've done has been for free for people who've already purchased the game. Right? Obviously, people have not come in yet and not bought the game initially. There's $20 or whatever it is, whatever sale it is. You have to pay for it to play the game. But the people who've already bought it, they've gotten all these DLCs for free. And I'm not saying CIG needs to give a bunch of ships for free or anything. I'm not saying any of that. But they need to do something to generate some more goodwill within the community. And it's not about charging for it. It can't have a price tag associated with it. I mean, okay, here's another example: the whole F8 fiasco, or the Mark II fiasco. Again, like, hey, you won the what is it? The honor of being able to pay $200 for this ship. God, that is not the way to win goodwill with people. I mean, it's a very cool ship, and from one perspective, they need to make money, but it doesn't do any favors to the people who are on the fence, for the people on the fence. And those are the people that, I'm sorry to say, for all you people backing who like don't care about new people coming on, that's what they need to do. There needs to be new blood coming in. No, that's, I think, how No Man's Sky survived, is new blood coming in and coming in.
They're not not releasing stuff to milk existing folks, right? Like we've said during this, I've been trying to look throughout this podcast, but I don't see anything about them selling additional things to people. And maybe there might be on the website some stuff, maybe real ships you could buy or something like that. But as far as playing the game, I've seen nothing about additional monetization other than them selling the game. And that basically means, like you said, new folks. That's what they're doing every time, just introducing it to new folks and surviving through that.
And I think that the goodwill that they've generated is like, it snowballs, because the people who paid for it already are like, guys, they're talking to their friends, right? They're posting on their social media. They're saying, I bought this game, look at how much they've improved, and they've not charged me anything for it. And that makes people feel good about coming and buying No Man's Sky, because it feels like the developers are genuinely, they have the best interest of the players in mind. They just want to give them a good time. Now, I will say there comes a point where you do need to charge for things, because things, making a game isn't free. But you can't do it at every turn. You still need to do something to give people that good feeling that you care about them, that you want to deliver a great experience. And it can't just be talking about it. It has to be through actions as well as words. And I think CIG have done too much words and not so much action for generating goodwill.
Absolutely. Yeah. Little over the words. It just seems like this is good business, No Man's Sky. And we can't possibly know the intricacies of how they run the business, but the balance of a smaller team and using the tech to create, to double down on something that isn't man-hour heavy, but provides a lot of good quality entertainment for people. The procedural generation of these planets, it's not the most important part of the game, because you're still benefiting from a lot of the base building and the crafting and just in general doing things around the game that the quality of the planets isn't as focused on as something like Star Citizen is. And so they're able to offload the work that they might have spent in making really beautiful handcrafted worlds and put that towards something else that can bring a lot more to the game, keep the team size low, and focus on the important bits to keep selling new copies. And it just feels like a very tightly ran ship, Like there's somebody who is solely, obviously there's somebody solely focused on how much money is the game making and how much is it putting out. And they have balanced it down to a T to allow this game to continue to flourish over these years and keep on bringing new people in. And it's really, it's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the 5.0 update, and this is, by the way, I should point out, I did put this in the video. I should have. This is part 1 of 3. Apparently, there are 2 other updates to follow this update, which are going to be more content focused. This initial one has content, has new worlds, but they also did like a lot of visual upgrades to make the game feel more modern, more contemporary, because it came out 8 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
It was aging a little.
It was aging a little bit. They brought up those. It's still stylized, but it's beautiful and stylized and looks modern now thanks to the updates. So I think that they've hit that perfect mark somehow, right? They're an independent company working solely off sales of the game with no additional, content that they're charging for. No, premium store. In an age where every single game has a premium store, how do they do it? God, I mean, it's amazing. It really is amazing when you think about it. And now they're working on another game. It's presumably based off the funding of No Man's Sky, because how else are they getting their funding, right? They're not pre-selling this new game or anything. To my knowledge, are they? Do they have sales open for this new game or something that they're asking people to pre-purchase it? I'm not sure. But even if they are, at some point they must have started based off of their own funding from No Man's Sky. So it's pretty remarkable what they've been able, and the comeback. I mean, round of applause for Hello Games and Sean Murray for showing the rest of the gaming world like how to be a genuinely great creator of games, how to be a great developer, and gain back the love and support of a community that felt hurt and kind of betrayed a little bit initially. Like that 180, going from the lowest point you can go in gaming to being from the laughing stock of everybody, gamers and developers alike, because of how hard it crashed at the beginning and how poorly expectations were set, to now where like everybody loves you and actually defends the hell out of you if somebody brings up the bad launch. Like I've mentioned it in videos before. People are like, why are you talking about this? Like they've already redeemed themselves. What are you saying? Like that's where they are now. It's incredible. I hope Star Citizen gets to that point, by the way. They're not at the low point that No Man's Sky. They never got to that low point yet. They could get to that low point though. I'm not ruling it out.
Yeah, I do hope, and I think that Star Citizen reached a low point, but it's bumpy. It really is bumpy, and I think.
But it was never as low as the No Man's Sky release. I think there hasn't been that. It's never been that public either. Disappointment moment. It could happen with, say, release of Squadron 42. I don't think it will, but certainly they're not at a high point.
No,
and they're not at the highest point they could be. No. Judging by the general feeling in the gaming community, which was most recently spoke about by Moist Critical. So they've got some work to do to get to the renown and love of No Man's Sky, and I'm talking generally everybody being happy with it. Most people. Like I think most people are happy with No Man's Sky now. Whether or not they enjoy playing it, they're like, wow, cool story. They came back from nothing, almost nothing, right?
Everybody knows it.
Star Citizen is kind of like, still everyone's like, isn't that scam game? Like that's the first thing people say still.
Yeah, Star Citizen needs to prove out the model that they've taken with their crowdfunding, and they need to prove out the gameplay that they've talked about so much but have not delivered. And I think what they can really learn from No Man's Sky, like you said, is walking the walk instead of talking it, and starting to deliver more for the players rather than just for the funding of a game. And the game's in development, but players don't care. Like we're past that point at this point. I've always been a big proponent of, they need to push forward and make sure that they're developing the features and the stuff that they're making. I still believe in that, but at the same time, they're supporting basically a live running MMO for a lot of people, and it doesn't feel that way for those people, and they need to make it so.
I think you had a question about what I'm most excited for this year. I'm not sure if we have time to answer that question.
Yeah.
I want to answer this question. I want to caveat again everything we've been saying about how we feel about how I feel about Star Citizen. Like I've been kind of a little bit harsh on it, and sometimes I am. But I genuinely still am most excited for it of anything. Like I genuinely still love the project. On my list of things I'm most excited for, it's still number one because it's still the game that inspires the most excitement for the scope that they want to accomplish. It's still incredibly ambitious with such incredible and enthusiastic people behind it that are developing it who genuinely love making games. That doesn't come out for everybody else to see. It's only, I know this because I've been covering it so intimately, and I've met the developers, and I know that they're genuine. The development of the game is coming from a genuine place. They're not the way that people paint them as like money grubbing and just trying to find a way to get as much money out of everybody as they can before they run away with it. Like that's not how I see them, and that's not what they are. Still got some work to do to make sure that everybody else knows that, and they need to do that through their actions and not through their words.
Yeah, and that's just specifically you're talking between the different space things that we've talked about today: No Man's Sky, Star Wars Outlaws, even the Starfield DLC. Star Citizen is still the one that has you most excited for something significant happening.
Right. Yeah, it's the one I'm most excited for. I'm still excited for 4.0 to see the progress and stuff. But I am also excited about those other games. Like very excited for Outlaws, very excited for No Man's Sky, which I'm playing right now, and not as we're doing this. I'm not playing while we're talking, but like
gaming off to the side.
I'm playing mostly that right now. And what was the other game on the list aside from it was Outlaws, Star Citizen 4.0, No Man's Sky, and
the one you keep forgetting, Starfield.
Starfield. Oh crap! I'm so sorry. I did enjoy it, but I'm just not as excited for the DLC because I guess knowing that they might abandon this or feeling that they will just makes me so disappointed. I'm not saying this is like confirmed because I don't know. I have no inside information on this. I just feel like the lack of commercial success for Starfield is going to make them abandon it, and I don't want to see that happen.
That's actually something that I've noticed about that is that they announced that DLC a while back, and I honestly thought it had already come out. And it goes to show how good the No Man's Sky update strategy is. Jean Marie has decided he doesn't talk about updates until they're ready to ship, and that has really helped them in that he will announce an update and then it will be out that day, and that is incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Truly something special to be able to hear about something on YouTube and not have to wait a month to play it or 3 months to play it is it's a different kind of feeling.
Yeah, Zero. I mean, I know maybe I shouldn't be reading chat here in the podcast room, but Zero brought up CD Projekt Red about The Witcher and stuff. I want to talk about, actually, it reminds me of something more recent from them, Cyberpunk. The release of Cyberpunk, as many know, didn't go as they had hoped. It was released too early, probably. They had a lot that they needed to fix. But they came back with it. And I would say, especially with this most recent DLC, the last one they did, the Phantom Liberty update, was phenomenally good. It was so good. In fact, I would say the new edition is almost it feels like it should have been part of the first game. It's so good, like the acting and everything. In my mind, they came back from the abyss. I initially liked the release, by the way, but generally I think that it's gotten a lot better than its initial release, and they fixed a lot of the issues with it. They even added things that people had expectations about that weren't in the initial launch, like the subway system can now be used. I think that Bethesda could learn from that. They could see that, yes, you can make a comeback by putting some effort into a DLC. I just am not so sure they're going to take that lesson.
Yeah.
Which worries me.
So several.
It's possible. It could be.
It
doesn't have to be. So what I'm saying is, like, they could look at it as they don't need to develop a game over 8 years like No Man's Sky did to make a comeback. They could put a ton of effort into like a really good DLC like CD Projekt Red did and still make a comeback. But will they learn that lesson? Who knows?
It's like you said, man. It depends on where the money is going, whose pockets it's going into, because those are the people who make the decisions. And for No Man's Sky, it's their own pockets. For Bethesda, it's not. And
yeah,
they don't get that. You have to. We talked about this during the pod. No Man's Sky and the company Hello Games has done a good job of clearly balancing their costs versus their revenue, and that means they can put out DLCs for free. Meanwhile, Bethesda's got to charge for the DLC and still has to make a tough decision of whether they cut support for the game or not, because everything's got to make money right away. Can't be goodwill. It can't be new players over time. It can't be a vision that they've set out to complete and eventually get to. It's, did it make money this year? No? Okay. Fire some people, move on to the next one. And that's what sucks about big game games, big company games.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a guarantee that you can make a comeback. But I think there's a good chance Starfield could make one.
I hope so.
Which is the biggest shame of all.
I hope so.
If they don't do it.
Well, Morph, thank you so much for joining me for this talk. This was really good. No Man's Sky it's a good game. I'm glad that they made it. I still remember booting it up for the first time. I was in training at my first engineering job, sitting in an extended stay for some training, and I got like 2 hours into the game, and I debated very heavily about doing my Steam refund because they had that like 2 hour thing, and I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I stuck with it and still have it now and can still play that same copy because they proved that the trust put into that company, while it was disappointing at first, it paid off in dividends over time. So thanks for coming on to talk about this nice little unicorn of the gaming industry, my man. Tell the folks where they can find some of your well thought out and sometimes too high quality content on YouTube and wherever else you're posting it.
Yeah, that makes me sound like I'm full of myself.
No, you're not
too
full of
high
yourself.
quality.
Trust me.
I meant to say I put too much effort into it.
Everybody knows that you are putting out incredibly high quality stuff, and I know exactly what you mean in the sense that if you polish it too much, it sounds like you're trying to make up for the lack of maybe like integrity or something with just shiny visuals.
It comes off as corporate, like corporate stuff is super polished and so well put together, but by doing that, you're like, it feels like it's not made by a human. It feels like it's made by an ad company that's got a group of people in a boardroom figuring out what the best thing to say is to make you want to watch. That's what I mean. Like, I don't want to sound that way. But to answer your question, you can find me on YouTube at Morphologis, or on Twitch at Morphologis, or on Twitter or X at Morphologis. I'm there. I'm also on Instagram if you're interested. I'm on most platforms.
Why is that website called X, man?
I don't know. It's so stupid. Oh, God. I don't know why.
It never grew into it. Like, it just never caught on.
Like, I still don't want to call it X. It's so weird. And Twitter, you do tweets. Like, on X, what do? You do X's? What the
slashes.
Like, what are we?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's silly. So,
but I'll say this:
I'm sad that Elon's. Sorry, I was gonna say Elon's arc has gone so. It's just so weird. His arc is so weird.
Oh, be careful! His people are gonna be in the comments. It's freaking.
I know. Look, I loved Elon Musk. It's just, why did you have to change the name of Twitter to X? I don't know. I don't think that was necessary. I think that was more vanity than anything else. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. But as far as quality goes, you were one of my original inspirations getting on YouTube. The quality of your Architect Review series and just your coverage of Star Citizen overall was huge. And kind of just like understanding how I wanted to approach it. I wanted to make videos that I enjoyed, and I realized that of all the content I was watching at the time, yours was the most enjoyable. And I think that's been a staple of your channel, and I think people love it. And don't worry, you don't sound full of yourself, because I know exactly what you mean. If you make something, if you do a lot with something, people are like, why? Like, why is there so much put into this? Are you getting paid for it or what? So
yeah,
I understand.
Oh, I really appreciate the kind words, and I want to say right back at you, man. Well, you came after me. I'm very much inspired by your content as well. I think that you have elevated the quality of the content expectations in the community with your well thought out, well scripted, and well researched videos, which I watch and continue to enjoy. So, despite the difficulties that you faced recently we've all faced in the Star Citizen content creation community, I want to encourage you to stick with it and stick to your guns and be who you are, which is a high quality content creator with amazing content. So, if you're watching this from my channel and you're only learning about this because it was recommended to you because you saw Morphologis in the thing, please subscribe to Space Tomato and follow him because he's such a great creator and a gem of the community that I think deserves millions of views.
Well,
sadly, nobody's watching Star Citizen content right now, so you gotta make some more content other than
maybe
Star
just
Citizen.
hundreds of views right now. It's
It's
a downtime. But thank you again for joining me on the show. I appreciate you, man. And thank you all for watching or listening. If you're on YouTube and you don't like ads, our audio platform is still ad-free. And mainly supported by our supporters, chilling in chat right now, talking with us and throwing in the comments. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you all for watching this show. We'll be right back to it next week, same time, same place, maybe a slightly different time, but you know what I mean. Anyways, thank you. We appreciate you. And I'll see you all next week.